On the outskirts of Hollow Creek, perched atop a hill overlooking the town below, was an old abandoned house. Its windows were boarded up, its paint was peeling, and it looked like something out of a nightmare. To most people, it was just an eyesore. But to those who knew its history, it was a place of fear and tragedy. For it was here in this very house that 7 people had died, and their deaths had all been foretold by the same ominous message. Now, there are plenty of creepy houses around the world, but this one was different. You see, before each person met their demise, they received a letter in the mail, a letter that told them exactly how they would die. And what made it even more terrifying was that every single prediction came true. One day, a woman named Margaret Pierce, who had recently inherited her grandmother's home, decided to move into the house despite the chilling rumors. She thought it was just a bunch of superstitious nonsense, but soon she would learn the truth. As she unpacked her belongings, she found an old dusty box hidden in the attic. Inside was a stack of yellowed letters, each one detailing the gruesome death of someone who had lived in the house before her. Each letter was written in the same shaky handwriting, and each one had been delivered 1 week before the corresponding death. There was the letter about Margaret's grandmother, then her great-aunt, and going back further, she found letters about a young girl named Lucy and her parents, as well as a man named Thomas Blackwood, whose death dated back to 1912. It was then that Margaret realized she wasn't just living in a haunted house, she was living in a death house. It was as if the house itself was feeding off the energy of fear and despair, reveling in the misery of its inhabitants. As she read through the letters, she could feel the weight of their despair pressing down on her, suffocating her with dread. The words seemed to leap off the page, slithering around her, coiling around her heart, squeezing the breath out of her lungs. She could almost hear the screams of the victims echoing through the halls of the house, their pain and terror seeping into her bones. As the days passed, Margaret grew increasingly uneasy. She began to see shadows out of the corner of her eye, to hear whispers when no one was around. And as the full moon rose higher in the night sky, the atmosphere in the house grew thicker, heavier, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her, trapping her in a suffocating embrace. Then the nightmares started. They came upon her with the force of a tidal wave, crashing over her, pulling her under, dragging her into a maelstrom of darkness and despair. In her dreams, she saw the faces of the dead staring at her with accusing eyes, their presence a suffocating blanket that left her gasping for air. She tried to escape the house, but no matter where she went, the oppressive feeling of dread followed her. Outside, the trees seemed to be reaching out for her, their branches gnarled and twisted fingers digging into her skin. The birds in the trees looked like specters of death, their eyes hollow sockets staring into her soul. And as the sun set and the shadows grew longer, she felt a growing sense of menace, as if something evil was stirring in the darkness, waiting to pounce. Margaret was now terrified and desperate for help. She reached out to Father Michael, a local priest known for his wisdom and compassion. He arrived at the house and immediately sensed the darkness that permeated its very being. He spoke words of comfort and performed ancient rituals, but it was as if the evil in the house was laughing at his efforts. With each passing hour, the atmosphere in the house grew more oppressive, the shadows deeper, the whispers louder. Then, one night, as the storm raged outside, Margaret heard a scratching at her window. She looked out to see a figure standing on the lawn, its face obscured by the darkness. It beckoned to her, its finger pressed to its lips. Startled, Margaret pulled away from the window. But as she turned to leave, she saw another figure in her doorway, its eyes glowing red in the darkness. She screamed, but her voice was lost in the wind. The 2 figures advanced on her, their presence growing stronger, their eyes boring into her soul. And in that moment, Margaret knew that she was not just facing a supernatural threat, she was facing her own mortality. The last thing she remembered was the icy grip of fear as the figures closed in on her, their faces now clear in the moonlight. They were the same the ones who had died in the house, their souls forever bound to it. And now they were here to claim her as the next victim. Morning light crept through the gaps in the boarded-up windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie silence that was somehow even more terrifying than the howling winds. As the townspeople gathered outside the house, their faces etched with grim determination, they prepared to lay the latest victim to rest. But before they could, a figure emerged from the house, their face ashen, their eyes wide with terror. This was Martha, the housekeeper who had been with Margaret since she moved in. In a voice trembling with fear, she recounted the horrors she had witnessed, the scratching at the window, the figures in the darkness, Margaret's desperate pleas. And then, as if in answer to Martha's tale, the front door creaked open and a letter tumbled out, fluttering to the ground like a wounded bird. The townspeople gathered around it, their faces pale in the morning light. It was addressed to Margaret, and as they read the contents aloud, a collective gasp escaped their lips. The letter detailed Margaret's death, word for word, as Martha had described it. But that wasn't all. It also contained a prediction for Martha herself, outlining her own demise with chilling accuracy. Just as the letter had predicted, Martha would die peacefully in her sleep. That same night, as the full moon hung heavy in the night sky, Martha was found dead in her bed, a serene smile on her face. The townspeople were shaken, not just by the accuracy of the predictions, but by the callous disregard for life that the letters implied. After burying Martha, the townspeople decided enough was enough. They would banish the evil from the house once and for all. They gathered in the town square, their faces grim, their voices echoing with determination. They vowed to destroy the house, to erase the darkness that had seeped into its very foundations. With heavy hearts and resolute steps, the townspeople returned to the house. They set about their grim task, wielding not weapons, but tools, their anger giving them strength. But as they worked, the air grew heavy, the shadows deepened, and the whispers seemed to mock their efforts. Just as they were about to strike the final blow, a figure emerged from the house, his face haggard, his eyes blazing with manic energy. It was Dr. Caldwell, the town's doctor, who had treated many of the victims before their deaths. In a voice hoarse with terror, he warned them to stop, to listen to him. Caldwell explained that he had discovered something terrible, something that connected all the deaths, the house, and the letters. He had seen the darkness in the eyes of those who had died, and he had watched as it grew stronger, hungrier with each passing year. He believed that the house was the source of the evil, that its very essence was corrupt, decaying, spreading like a disease. As Caldwell spoke, the townspeople listened, their anger slowly giving way to understanding. They realized that destroying the house would not solve anything. The evil was too deeply rooted, too entwined with the fabric of the town, and so they made a decision. They would abandon Hollow Creek, leaving the house and its darkness behind. They left their homes, their businesses, their lives, and headed into the unknown, their faces etched with sorrow and their eyes filled with fear. As they walked away from Hollow Creek, they never looked back. They couldn't bear to witness the death of their beloved town, the death that had been foretold in letters sealed with blood. And as the sun set, casting long shadows across the deserted streets, the house loomed over them, a silent, ominous silhouette against the dying light. For now, it stood empty, its secrets buried in the dust of its abandoned rooms. But the darkness within it stirred, patient, hungry, waiting for its next victims. And when they arrived, it would welcome them with open arms, or perhaps it would send them letters first.